And I'm absolutely delighted now to be joined by Helen and Quacha. And Helen is the head men's coach and head of youth football for, and I'm going to have a go at pronouncing this, Tvoroyra Boltfalag, who play in the top division in the Faroe Islands. So Helen, a massive big welcome to the show to you. Great to have you with us. But first, I'd like you to start off. I've pronounced your name incorrectly, I'm sure. I haven't got it quite right. I certainly haven't got the name of the team right. So tell me firstly how I'm pronouncing your name, and tell me how I pronounce the name of the team that you're coach for.
Well, it's pronounced Helen. I'm kidding.
Thanks. I did wonder.
It's a strange one. Helen and Quacha. I'm Nigerian, and the club is actually just a TB, so it removes all the challenge of trying to pronounce the name of our city. So you just say TB.
How close was I? Was it a 5 out of 10? Bit higher, bit lower?
It's better than me, so I think
you
definitely scored higher than I usually score.
All right, and we've known each other for a while, and great to catch up again. And just really to continue my introduction, you're a former player. You went on to become a coach. You're now a highly experienced coach, and you worked in various capacities with the likes of New York Red Bulls, Millwall, Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea. You've even worked in some capacity with Manchester United and Liverpool. You worked in Nigeria before joining your current club in the Faroe Islands Premier Division in February this year. But that's not all. That's not by any means the whole story. You set up your own soccer coaches agency as well, and you've worked as a mentor with anti-racism organisation Kick It Out. And of course, we have worked together before during your time as a columnist for the football website I was editor of. So let's go back to the start. You as a player making that transition, and New York Red Bulls came before Chelsea and Tottenham and Arsenal and all those teams. So how did that transition come about from player to New York Red Bulls?
Well, this is quite a while ago now, football terms. So I actually retired from playing in 2010, and I was still doing my full-time normal job. I took a sabbatical, so I took like a year out, and I'd managed to get a role with New York Red Bulls, but it was only for the short term. During that time that I was able to get away from my normal day-to-day job. And that, to be honest with you, was really what made me kind of get the bug for coaching. And I decided that I absolutely loved it. It was very, very difficult, or it is very, very difficult, very challenging. And I'd love the day-to-day challenges on so many different levels. So my short stint with the Red Bulls, we weren't doing anything amazing. We were being sent out to work with local clubs representing the Red Bulls, understanding the brand and the philosophy and the way in which the youth academy looked to play. But it was a wonderful experience, really wonderful club to work for, very open to developing the coaches as well. We were able to sit down with the first team coach, and after a training session, he came and sat down with the coaches from the community, and he explained to us about how he delivers his session, his planning, and had open questions with us as well, which you very rarely get, in my experience, after having worked for Red Bulls. So that's really what did it, working for Red Bulls and taking a sabbatical, and then deciding that it's what I wanted to pursue full time.
And then you've had an association with some of the biggest clubs in England, of course, the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea. You referred to that being a great experience with New York Red Bulls. Must be the same kind of rewarding experience to work with and have an association with clubs that are at that level that those clubs are. And what was that like to get all that varied experience with the different clubs?
A lot of it I found was about branding, about recognising the importance of the legacy of the club, depending on which part of the business you actually operate in, because these clubs are so massive that when you hear, oh, somebody works for that, it's important to find out which area of the business they actually work for. So with Chelsea, for example, I was on the foundation side. I was a coordinator in one of the foundation programs. And with Arsenal, I was with the development centre on the boys' side. With Manchester United, I was with the soccer school. So you get to learn about, really, it's almost, when you're being hired, you're, especially for Manchester United, my actual credentials were only part of why I was successful. They looked a lot deeper into who you were, how you understood the club running, and what you understood about the history of the club, how you conveyed that to young people and the families. That was so important to them. And the fact that you got an insight to that, it really helped me understand, right, you have to get over the fact you're working for these big clubs. You have to know the importance of the club and how to translate that in your sessions and with young people in conversation.
And then after all of that fantastic experience, you had an opportunity to go out to Nigeria and work over there, which completely makes sense, with being that you're Nigerian. So that's seems like a logical move. But then, how did you go from being in Nigeria, working over there, to working for a club in the Faroe Islands? How did that come about?
I'm actually an ambassador for one of the clubs in Lagos. So I haven't actually been out there in a footballing capacity. My cousin's a former player, so I'm. We speak about the state of the game often, but I haven't actually been to Nigeria in a footballing capacity. Before Faroe Islands, I was in Shanghai for 3 years, and that was a fantastic experience. At the time, it didn't feel fantastic. It was very challenging, and I'd just taken on so much learning there. A lot of what we did in Shanghai, I still do a lot of that now with how I operate, how I try to work. So that has had a big impact on how I try to work now. With the Faroe Islands, I was working in Chicago, and a friend of mine contacted me, and he was in Faroe Islands, and he said the club is looking for a head of youth. Would you be interested? And at the time, in Chicago, we were having so many people impacted by COVID. We couldn't get any programs running. It was very, very difficult to continue with that because their day-to-day lives were being so disrupted. And then speaking with the board at the club in Faroe Islands, it was such a great opportunity. It was difficult to turn down. So the reason I came here was because it's actually a really attractive opportunity for any coach, to be honest with you.
And I imagine an adventure for you as well, a new experience. I mean, it hasn't been a year yet. I think you've been there about 9 or 10 months, but what an experience it must have been for you. And you've had plenty of great experiences, but this particular one, something very different. What's it been like the first, almost coming up to a year now?
Really, very, very different to where I came from, because I came from a big brand and everything we were doing was very prescribed. We were working to the Liverpool philosophy and the Liverpool curriculum for the youth players. And then coming to a club, obviously you have to then acclimatise to what the club philosophy is and what it is that the players have been, what have they been doing for their years worth of football. And they're not affected so greatly by COVID here, so they haven't really had many interruptions to their learning. So on the footballing side, we have 12 teams on the youth program, senior women's team and a senior men's team who were in the top flight, and we had the men's second team. So it was like your average professional club, but acclimatising to the youth structure, because obviously Faroe Islands, on a global scale, they aren't as competitive as the places that I've come from, or where I'm from back home, obviously being England. So it has been a big challenge just acclimatising to the difference in expectation of the football, but also the actual teaching of it.
And I mentioned previously that you have worked as a mentor with Kick It Out, and I just want to get your view on this as someone who's worked in different countries and in different environments, different cultural environments as well. So as a black woman working as head coach of a men's team in the Faroe Islands Premier Division, do the players and the fans view you just as an experienced coach, and they value what you've got to bring, or have you experienced anything that's kind of negative, or in terms of reactions or even reservations with that in mind?
Well, yeah. Have I experienced anything? Not overtly, no. It's been a really good response, and any challenges that there have been, I think when you're the first to do something, it's like it's realistic that there will be some hiccups or a teething period. Actually, in terms of sort of like a racial emphasis, a couple of years ago, I was actually working in California, and I think I worked in California for coming up to 2 years, and I experienced two racist incidents where I was called a racial slur twice. One of them was a text message after a game, and you just think, well, I haven't received anything back home in England. I haven't received anything overtly here in Faroe Islands, and it was actually in America that I had received racial abuse. So I haven't had any overtly negative experiences in terms of racism, not at all.
And talk a little bit about the role that you've had. I don't know if you're still involved with Kick It Out, but what form did that take?
Not involved with them anymore. I mean, it was quite a while ago now, and obviously so many new ideas come along, and different ways of doing things, and different sort of projects come along. I was one of many actually who were lucky enough to be approached to be a mentor for young coaches looking to come through, and it was coaches of colour, coaches who may be ordinarily marginalised groups, and so it's just a case of listening to people's stories, finding out where it is they want to go with their journey and coaching, while still trying to figure out my own journey. And it was something which maybe I didn't understand would be such a big impact. And I met a young guy who is from the same part of South London as me, and for him it was a real big deal to have me as sitting there giving him advice. And you just don't realise the impact that might have on someone. I definitely didn't. And afterwards, I sort of read an interview he did, and he was just so happy to have spoken to me, because we're both Nigerian, we're both from the same part of London, and he felt a real connection there, and it really made me think about how I sort of represent myself with fellow coaches and with other people who might be seeking to find out a bit more about what they could be doing with their footballing journey.
And as a woman, the issue of colour and any potential kind of racism element or any of that aside, you know, even as a woman coaching a men's team at the top level in that particular country, and on top of that, you're a black woman coaching a men's team. Do you feel like a pioneer, or are you just, you know, you're not thinking about that, you're just getting on with doing the best job you can as a coach?
No, I'm not thinking about it, because I don't think about it because it's not unusual for me to be the only female or the only black female amongst the group. You know, in university, I studied English literature. You'd go to the lectures. I might be the only black female in the lecture hall. Where I worked in the city for a year before going into the police. You know, you're on the bus or walking down, and you're the only person of colour, the only black female there. And obviously in the police, I was riot trained supervisor for, I think, 4 or 5 years, and you know, I was often the only black female supervisor at riot briefings or on the carrier with PCs in charge of them. So I actually don't think about it as much as maybe people would expect me to think about it, but it's because, well, my past means that I've actually experienced this quite a bit, and it doesn't really faze me that much anymore.
And obviously a really interesting point in your career and your life at the moment. What do you think is next for you? Is it just heads down and, you know, do the best you can in the role that you've got, and then think about something else when it comes up at a later date, or do you have a plan, or what's the next step for you?
I really, really enjoy working with young players, so players under the age of 21. I think it's such an important role, the youth coach, you know, especially working as I have done over the past few weeks with our first team here. In my sort of humble experience, you know, I haven't been lucky enough to work with any elite players. You know, I watch interviews with coaches, male and female, who are working at the highest end of the game, and I'm like, you know, I'm hanging on their every word. You're trying to constantly learn, and even though I haven't had that opportunity to work with the elite senior players or anything similar, working with a first team who are operating at the highest level in their country, you do look for detail, and anything that you sort of identify as a problem, you have to work backwards and think, well, when did that problem start? And that, I think, places the value on the youth coach, because that was something that was it was prevalent maybe when that senior player was 13, and when they were 12, when they were, you know, if you've got them at your club, that you've got a great amount of contact time with them. So if they're training 4 times a week, what are they doing, and are they being prepared for that senior performance that you're looking for? So working with our senior team has helped me understand, hey, that the youth coach is really, really important to what I'm looking at right now with these big men. You know, what have they been doing 10 years ago?
And just for clarification, you're working with the youth squads alongside the men's first team, aren't you?
Yeah, so I'm in charge of our youth program, developing their curriculum, the different programs that they have, the development plans. So that's what I was hired to do. So that's what I've been doing, and I'm actually the first female in the country to do this role. So they haven't got another female head of youth in the country, which is strange.
Well, Helen, it's been fantastic, not just to get you on as a guest on the show, and you know, and kind of delve into what's a fascinating role, I'm sure for you personally, and I was really interested to find out more about it, but also the opportunity to